This week's crypto recap coming to you from a brand new studio, Nick. It's exciting to get this underway. Long time coming.
Yeah, very excited to get in person to do these podcast sessions. And this week we've got a lot on the agenda.
Definitely US government selling their massive Bitcoin holdings. We'll talk about that. PayPal pushing more into the stablecoin market. Big news always out of PayPal, big one to watch. And then, of course, our general market update and our talk about some of our altcoins that we are watching at the moment. So we'll break this down to you all in under 30 minutes as per usual with the market. Quite flat to down slightly in the past 7 days, which, as we've said many times in the past few months, we're sort of due for some of this sideways price action, and we've definitely got that recently. What is probably worth noting for any of you out there watching or listening is the stock indices in the US. So S&P 500, the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, all recording more than 1% decline in a single day. That's notable because it's the first time it's happened in many months, which gives you a sign of how, I suppose, risk on this market globally has been recently. So yeah, chilling out for a bit to put it one way, and crypto definitely being a part of that.
Also, crypto 1% sounds not that much in crypto lands, but we have to remember in traditional finance, a 1% drop across the board is major news.
Yeah, in a single day, definitely. So yeah, even just to bring it back up to speed, we're continuing to see Bitcoin outperform. So people always think of that on the upside, but this is a great example where you can see that Bitcoin outperformance to the downside. Like at the time of recording, it's down 2% for the past 7 days. ETH's down 5 to 6%, and Solana's down 12, 13%. So Bitcoin outperforming in that respect. But what was driving the news from a market standpoint, specifically on crypto last week, one of the biggest factors that I saw a lot of people talking about was the US government selling their Bitcoin. So surprising many people would be the fact that, the US government is one of the largest holders of Bitcoin out there in terms of a single entity. So around 1% of the total supply that they are holding. So there were talks last week that they were starting to sell off some of it. Why does the government have so much Bitcoin? It's really just to do with seizing assets through different things like the Silk Road closure, and then just other criminals that they're finding and prosecuting and whatnot, where they confiscate essentially Bitcoin as part of the broader sort of cleanup process that comes there. So they're looking to sell some. Pleasingly, I guess from my perspective, is that Bitcoin didn't seem to be too sensitive to that selling pressure, which is a promising sign. But in what was a pretty quiet week news-wise, that was one that was definitely in the conversation a lot. Yeah,
this one is something we've been tracking, I know, for our members. There's been a lot of talk about the US government selling some of that Bitcoin. From what I saw, is only about 100 million of that 2 billion sort of stockpile they do have. So it's not like US government is dumping it all on the market at once, which maybe that's why Bitcoin reacted a bit positively to. And at the end of the day, you have to remember that 100 million on the Bitcoin market now, with all the inflows from the ETF and that demand pressure, will go a long way to, I guess, helping stabilize a lot of that sell pressure.
Yeah, well said. Over in Ethereum land, the other of the major cryptocurrencies, big news regarding the ETFs. What happened in the past few days?
Yeah, finally we've seen the SEC come out and ask for public comment for its ETH ETF applications, which was a major step forward. I know a lot of industry pundits sort of were diminishing their optimism for this ETF just because of how slow sort of the ETF applications were going. There was a lot of talk that the SEC hasn't really been engaging with many of the industry about the ETF. So this is a kind of a positive step forward, and we're going to finally get to see the good and the bad of the applications. And this goes a long way to perhaps getting a ETH ETF approved. It's the, I think, May 23 deadline everyone's got their eyes on. And we're finally starting to see some activity with more ETF issuers amending their applications, adding staking in, adding some of the terms, and now this public comment. All roads are really now focused on this ETF, which is probably one of the biggest catalysts for ETH in the next couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen, Bitcoin in the lead up, as we've talked about many times in this podcast, seeing what was happening with the Bitcoin ETF applicants, October, November last year was extremely high signal in terms of that the SEC was, showing interest in making sure that it was on their terms of these ETF issuers. They were meeting with the SEC quite often and amending things, which was ultimately a positive sign for why the ETF got approved in the sense that they were working together. Ethereum ETF, look, it hasn't been, as you said, there have been amendments, not as frequent as the Bitcoin ETF, but I would say the counter argument to that is, well, a lot of these things got teased out last year. So, I don't think you can read into it too negatively in the sense that, SEC, they're not as engaged as what they were with the Bitcoin ETF. I think they've definitely, come across and worked out a lot of things already, given it is essentially a much similar product. Obviously, BTC and ETH have very big differences. One of them staking, as you said, which, would be a big difference. And I think it would surprise, both of us. I know you feel this way too. It would surprise them if the SEC did approve an ETF for Ethereum and if they kept staking inside the ETF. That would be extremely surprising. I don't think we're counting on that anytime soon. So May 23rd, we might see an approval. But I think it will be price sensitive, in my opinion, either way. If we get that denial, obviously quite bearish. In the short term, if we get an approval, very bullish short term. But it's something that is short term ultimately. I think we're both aligned that Ethereum, is going to do quite well if this trajectory continues in the years to come for sure.
Perfect. Maybe we can look to PayPal. They're one of the biggest names that have been adopters of cryptocurrency. They've come out and enabled their stablecoin for international payments. I'm not sure I've been following this story, Matt, but probably one of the more underrated stories of the week that kind of went over the news headlines.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we saw that excitement with PayPal where they announced their PYUSD stablecoin, 8-9 months ago, something like that. It was initially just for US users, which I think is why it got a bit of hype at the start, but then hasn't really got as much traction as what many people would have thought. But that's really because it was a bit of a soft launch, really. And now I think one of the biggest upgrades has come in the last week with those international payments being enabled through their remittance platform called Zoom, XOOM. And that's available in more than 160 countries. So talk about going from just the US to ultimately enabling the PayPal USD to be used in more than 160 countries is, I have to pinch myself a bit to be like how far the
big
space
moment.
has come. Yeah, definitely.
For sure. And it's not only, I think, PayPal that are getting into the cryptocurrency market, but we even saw Ripple start to come out and say, hey, we're going to be launching our own stablecoin into the market now. Have you been following that bit of news? Yeah,
it's one of the oldest companies in the space coming out and putting their hat in the ring. It's a typical sort of 100% or one-for-one back stablecoin, where I guess the reserves are made up of just US cash as well as treasuries, which earn quite a big yield, I suppose, at the moment, and government bonds and whatnot. So stablecoin business model is arguably, in these rate environments, one of the world's most profitable businesses out there. So it's no surprise to see Ripple getting involved. And I guess the more competition, the better in terms of what end users are concerned in terms of fees and whatnot. So extremely exciting. Yeah, stablecoins are probably the one area I always know when people talk to me. Maybe people are skeptics about cryptocurrency. People may say, there's no real use case. I know there was a good piece on Bloomberg with one of the better markets, people who are very anti-cryptocurrency, saying that, this stuff has no fundamental use case. Well, I always sort of indicate to them and show them the use case of stablecoins because, for years now, it's been really difficult for people in developing countries, people that don't have as strong currencies as we do in Australia and the US. Stablecoins now are able to get a US dollar within the click of a button on your MetaMask or on your web wallet, which is a huge use case for millions, if not billions, of people living under less than stable currencies. That's probably the one I always look to, and that's why I think a lot of these stablecoin issuers are entering the market, because they're seeing that, hey, this is a fundamental change in the way that we transfer value and represent currency in the future. So really excited to see big names like Ripple enter the game, and we're only going to be seeing who are the big winners, because USDC have also enabled easier
deployment of their currency on multiple different blockchains, including Solana in the last couple of weeks. So I think we're only going to be seeing them hit or challenge all-time highs for the amount of stablecoin market cap on chain, which is, I think, only about $20 billion off an all-time high. So definitely topical and continued. Hopefully we can see some better laws for this stuff so we can encourage more people to use it and more businesses start to adopt it.
Absolutely, yeah. You see the adoption already before there's even more, I suppose, comprehensive, legislation. It's pretty exciting. So hopefully that momentum continues in that regard. Bring it back to like the Ethereum space and the whole layer 2 ecosystem or L2s. What have we got from VanEck here on their outlook for Ethereum L2s?
Yeah, this one was a very tasty research report that VanEck, one of the biggest asset managers in the space, they come out and looked at Ethereum L2s. So the projects building on Ethereum to scale it to millions, if not billions of users. In their report, they come out and said that the total market cap for these cryptocurrencies is about $1 trillion by potentially 2030. So, we often think 2030 is a long time away, but actually it's only 6 years away from becoming, coming around the corner. So they also said that they remain fairly bearish on these L2 cryptocurrencies. So despite the big market for these cryptocurrencies, they're still questioning potentially the long-term value of these L2 tokens, so the native tokens on these layer 2 platforms, against the likes of ETH. The question is whether these L2s can sustain the same level of performance with Ethereum over that long-term 5-year horizon in the crypto market. They cite things like large token unlocks for a lot of these L2s, because at the end of the day, there's billions and billions of dollars of valuations and billions of tokens that are entering the market. If the bear market does come around, say next year or the year after, essentially just saying that it's going to be really tough for these tokens to hold their value with such heavy unlocks in a crypto winter situation where demand is just nothing at all. So this is one thing that I did a write-up for members about how to play the L2 narrative in 2024, because it's just such a hotly contested space with new projects launching, and there'll be new L2s launching next year and towards the end of this year. So it's a very competitive space, which is also why I think the VanEck research team issued a bit of a cautionary tale for some of these L2s.
For sure, yeah. If you needed just a perspective on how badly, I suppose, or underperforming, the likes of OP and Aave are going, you can just go on CoinGecko, and instead of looking at it in USD terms or AUD terms, you can go on the OP chart or the ARB chart and do it against ETH. So that gives you a obviously really good way to gauge how these tokens perform against ETH. We saw them hyped up, or a big argument for why you would buy them is they're a way to get beta exposure to ETH. By that, meaning that if ETH goes up by a bit, then these L2s will go up by a lot, and vice versa. That hasn't played out to date yet in this young bull market, and VanEck sort of leaning on the side that they doubt that this will happen as well in the longer term. So very notable there, and those unlocks were very noteworthy because when you compare it against ETH, it's something that at the moment is actually deflationary versus ARB and OP and the many other L2 tokens, which obviously have a lot of tokens to be unlocked in the years to come. So one to keep a look at, and the winners of the L2s, I think, will be massive winners, and there'll be a lot of losers. So I think it's why as analysts, it's one that we're watching extremely closely.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe shifting focus now to altcoin updates in general. The one altcoin that I was looking at are a lot of these potential Bitcoin L2s that potentially could launch after the Bitcoin halving and when something called the BitVM is released. So this was one of the stories that took sort of the space under the radar in a little bit because there was another proposal for the BitVM that came out in the last week that kind of hinted we may be seeing a launch in the future. For those unaware, the BitVM is essentially just a bit of technology that allows you to go from Bitcoin to these other Bitcoin-like networks. And it really increases the trust assumptions that your Bitcoin is really your Bitcoin. And it reduces the risks of any loss or sort of fraud of, not being able to trust your Bitcoin. So this is a big deal because a lot of these projects are waiting on the BitVM to launch, because at the moment you just don't have the trust assumptions you traditionally do, and the BitVM changes that radically. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll see maybe more information. In the next couple of months, maybe a potential release date for the BitVM, because no doubt this is going to be a catalyst for all these other Bitcoin L2s that are trying to replicate some of the things you can do on Ethereum and connect it back and use your Bitcoin, which has tremendous impacts on Bitcoin because it makes it more usable, potentially increasing a lot of the utility and being able to repurpose that Bitcoin for other means.
Yeah, it's definitely a mind-blowing space that when you look at such an old piece of technology that is Bitcoin, and here you are 14, 15 years later with the likes of BitVM still coming out and really, I guess, transforming the way that we perceive, I suppose, how much we should trust using applications that are built on Bitcoin. And it is the reason why people are calling this the narrative of the bull market. Time will tell whether that plays out, but you see all the hype around gaming and AI and deep in things like that, and people are still saying this building on Bitcoin narrative will be bigger than that. So again, it's a wait and see. Obviously, a lot of it is talk, as you did just mention there, Nick. A lot of them are awaiting launches, a lot of them raising capital from venture investors and launching on testnet, things like that. But it's one we'll be watching very closely. And I know members really loved your post recently on the Bitcoin L2 landscape. Over to another recently launched altcoin, and that is Ethena. So their token went live, as we talked about last week. It did go live during the week. Quite a big valuation. I think it is 80th or 90th ranking by market cap from memory. And then also their total value locked. So $2 billion worth of tokens are being deposited in the protocol. And yeah, that's come from zero not that long ago, really.
Yeah, it's really shot up there. It's probably been one of the fastest growing cryptocurrencies of the last year or so. Yeah. I can't remember a time where we've seen maybe Blast that attained such high TVL, but even that took a while to get going. And maybe you can share more info on Ethena then. I know a lot of people talk about comparing it to Luna, Terra Luna that collapsed. That was a famous stablecoin, although Ethena isn't a stablecoin per se. They've changed the way they try and communicate what Ethena is to try and separate it from the likes of Terra Luna. But maybe in a nutshell, can you maybe just explain why Ethena is probably a bit different to things like Terra Luna? Yeah,
so Ethena, it's trying to basically make a tokenized version of a very popular type of trade that a lot of the derivatives traders have done in crypto and other markets for many years. And trying to essentially tokenize that and bring the yield from that proven profitable trade and pass that on, I suppose, to token holders. That, to really dumb it down, is what they're trying to do, which is what distinguishes it from a stablecoin, which UST was designed to be a stablecoin. And we saw their algorithm really spiral out of control, where the risk, I suppose, with that was, the pegging risk and I suppose the risk of, I suppose, the model collapsing, to really try to simplify it, where the risk with something like Ethena is more so execution risk and counterparty risk, really, which is, again, a very big distinction and why it is completely different from Luna. So you don't really have any risk of liquidation, I suppose, is the way to put it with Ethena. Which is quite notable there. So we'll keep watching. There's definitely different DeFi projects that at the moment, Maker and Aave, quite notably, are going a bit back and forth on the prospects and how safe Ethena is to use and whatnot. And everyone seems to be chipping in with their own opinion. So time will tell. And put it this way, I suppose, go a few months from here, I still think Ethena will be very topical. I think my gut feel is it'll be topical because it's still doing really well. But hopefully it won't be topical because it's really spiraled out of control. But it will be it is already one of this year's biggest launches, and I think it will continue to be making headlines as the year progresses in the altcoin market.
Yeah, well put there. I think it's probably a bit misunderstood if you would put it very simply, I think, because a lot of people probably have PTSD from the lunar collapse.
Understandably,
and, a lot of these FTX situations where they've faced a lot of loss and probably thinking, oh no, is this happening again, which probably affecting Ethena in a way. But back to another major altcoin launch was Wormhole, which is so-called kind of connection to different blockchains. So if you got your cryptocurrency on one chain, you're able to move it around to these other chains and use different platforms. So Wormhole launched their W token in one of the biggest airdrops ever. I think they distributed to about 400,000 different addresses. So if you used Wormhole in the past, potentially you were testing it out using different blockchains, you may be eligible for that airdrop. So perhaps we can put in a link in the show notes to see if you can claim it. And if you're eligible, I'm not sure if you got that one, Matt, but this one I wasn't, although I tested it very early back in 2021, but no airdrop for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know. Well, to your point, this is one we have been covering and paying attention to for years, and it was part of our airdrops page for quite a while. For anyone who's new to the podcast, or we do have our airdrops page, collectiveshift.io/airdrops. That has a list of eligible tokens, projects that we think will tokenize or likely to, and then there's also a member only section there for our top sort of analyst action items. And Wormhole is one that I actually did qualify for. So like every airdrop, there's just seems to be a few every week, and if I'm qualifying for one or two, I'm happy. But I know there's people out there, the full-time job is just to qualify for everyone. But it's just simply too much time and energy, in my opinion. But Wormhole's one that I'm very confident will be a part of this industry for as long as it exists. Really, I think by this stage it's pretty clear that the market is going to be a multi-chain market. What do I mean by that? Just there will be Ethereum, probably Solana, Bitcoin, and some other blockchains that will still be popular, widely used in many years to come, to really interoperate and be able to move around your money and capital quite easily. Infrastructure like Wormhole will be necessary, and they're sort of leading that cross-chain, I suppose, interoperability space. So one to keep watching, and one that will be relevant for many years to come.
Perhaps another area of the crypto economy that is one to watch for many years is DeFi, one of the first use cases to come out of cryptocurrency, to be able to swap on chain, to be able to lend your cryptocurrency. One of the pioneering protocols, Aave, one of their founders come out and teased a potential vote to turn on a so-called fee switch that would allow potential Aave stakers to get some of these profits from the chain, which has been from the application. I mean, that had been very profitable to many people's surprise. Maybe you got more info about whether this so-called fee switch is back and whether we're going to see potentially continued narrative in the coming weeks.
Yeah, in terms of narrative watch, this is high on the list. What do I mean by that? If Aave go ahead and someone such as the Aave Chan initiative is sort of a big active group in the Aave ecosystem, if they go ahead and propose a big, I suppose, upgrade to how fees are redistributed to DAO, people within the DAO or stakers of the Aave token, that would be one that really catalyzes, I suppose, a big shift in attention towards this whole debate or this whole trend maybe of people or protocols turning on the fee switch. So Aave DAO is, currently, as you said, to many people's surprise, very profitable. At the moment, their net profits is around 60 million annualized, which is quite remarkable given it's, just a bit of code. Oh, not a bit of code, that's probably, not good genuine service, but it's one that's built over the years, right? It's a smart contract, set of smart contracts that a lot of people have used. Is very secure, hasn't had like a massive hack from memory, and people sort of trust it. And now it's grown up to be, I guess, developing almost beyond a startup, really. And now it's this massively profitable entity, I suppose, lack of a better term. And now here we are in this maturing stage where the community is now, casting their eyes on what do we do with this massive treasury that Aave's accumulated, and hey, can we have some of this capital?
Yeah, essentially that's what it comes down to. And the way I look at it is Aave's they're probably one of the grown-up kids now in the crypto ecosystem that, as you said, haven't had a major hack. and they're one of the biggest trusted names in DeFi. Another, probably the big kid, Uniswap, has also been trying to turn on the fee switch for many years now, and that's only started to get more momentum in the last month, where one of the foundation members of the Uniswap Foundation, come out and actively put forward a heat check for a similar proposal. So the one thing I'm looking for is whether this is, as Matt said, part of a wider narrative of DeFi who have been beaten down as a whole sector for the last couple of years just because there's been no fundamental value accrual. A lot of people, will call things like Aave or Uniswap kind of quote unquote useless meme, governance tokens. Whether this could mark a huge shift of them from being just governance tokens to being useful value accrual tokens, they get a say and some of that treasury, which is a huge narrative for an industry and sector that would just been completely beaten down in the last couple of years.
Yeah, well said. Even to just really drive the point home, I think for hundreds of altcoins, mostly in DeFi, but there's also, many other examples of governance tokens. To really try to simplify it, like the dream scenario for a lot of investors over the years has been, okay, I think something like Aave is going to be very profitable. Why? Because they have a product that people really want to use. So people have invested or bought the Aave token speculating that at some stage in the future, this thing will grow very big and very profitable, and the community will decide to redistribute some of those profits to people who own the token or staking it. That's been the dream scenario. It's happened. There's been little tests and pilots, but from smaller projects over the years. Obviously, regulatory reasons are by far the big reason that's hampered that growth, and it's why DeFi tokens have remained just useless governance tokens, as the meme has sort of perpetuated. But it could be something that, it has been the bet essentially all these years purely from an investment standpoint. And it is speculation. It may not happen. There may simply be too tricky to navigate the regulations that come with sort of sharing profits with people who are staking tokens. So that's the big unknown, and that's why they have underperformed. I think because of that unknown, people haven't really wanted to touch DeFi tokens, understandably. But yeah, that Uniswap governance proposal that you mentioned, that is coming up for its final governance step, or their final vote is, I think, expected mid to late April. So that could actually line up nicely if Aave is then to come out. That's a big narrative watch for sure. So that's one thing that we're both definitely looking forward to. Was there anything else on the radar coming up in April that you're looking forward to, Nick?
There's a small thing about a halving. I'm not sure if anyone's gone onto it. But of course, the Bitcoin halving is really close now. It's, I think, within 15 days. It's striking distance. The one probably less reported thing that I'm most excited about is the projects that are going to be launching at the Bitcoin halving, because as we know, there's going to be a halving of the amount of issuance of Bitcoin that is earned for people that are working on the chain and are mining the chain, but people are kind of fading the projects that are going to be launching at the halving. So it's a really great marketing opportunity for a lot of these chains who want to build on Bitcoin, which is a big narrative that we're watching here at Collective Shift that's going to be taking hold. Now, we talked about the BitVM, but we're also just going to be seeing kind of the soft launch for a lot of this stuff at the halving, and even, I think, something called Runes by the creator of Inscriptions and the Ordinals protocol. They're going to be launching a very interesting new way to tokenize different things on Bitcoin. So that's one thing I'm really squared onto and really keen to see who and which of these projects will launch at the halving, because no doubt there's going to be a handful that will.
Yeah, one to watch definitely. And yeah, I think it'll be very Bitcoin focused second half of April for the reasons you outlined there. In terms of my favorite segment, I love this underrated, overrated segment of this podcast for anyone who is new. We try to wrap things up just by highlighting things that caught our eye or things that we think caught way too many eyes and wasn't actually that big. In this case, for this week, I have one that I do think was really underrated, and that is, it was an announcement of an investment round. So you see a lot of these, they often lose their signal because there's often, in bull markets in particular, there's typically a lot of crypto companies raising. So one that I would like to spotlight at the moment is Ellipsis Labs, which announced their Series A. So that was $20 million that they raised. they are the entity or the developer sort of studio behind Phoenix. So Phoenix is a DEX or decentralized exchange building on Solana. Essentially, they're trying to create it in such a way that it is what's known as an on-chain order book. Nick, I know you've covered this more or less since Ellipsis Labs was founded and a very younger team. Why do I highlight this? Well, yes, the concept does sound very interesting, but one thing that has caught my attention on Ellipsis Labs, and it's why we've both been paying attention to it since the start, is just the quality of the team. So it definitely should not be the only thing that directs your attention as an analyst or an investor, but it is one that I value very highly because this space is so new and there's not much to latch onto when you're looking at analyzing projects, particularly very new ones. But I've heard a lot of Solana developers speak very highly of the, I guess, competency of Ellipsis Labs, and that's why that in and of myself is why I'm confident just highlighting it here, and why we'll keep paying attention to the development of Phoenix.
Yeah, perfect. I might keep on the underappreciated bandwagon there for Lightspark teaming up with Coinbase. So Lightspark is a company that I've been following really closely because it was created by David Marcus, former PayPal president, and he was kind of the brainchild and head of Facebook's blockchain projects. When they were trying to launch their own stablecoin, their own blockchain, which unfortunately got disbanded due to regulatory concerns. He went on to create a Bitcoin-focused startup called Lightspark. So they're basically trying to simplify and abstract all the complexity with the Lightning Network and how to set it up. And they're sort of partnering with different exchanges to allow them to support Lightning. So Coinbase is getting into the Lightning game, which I think is a huge opportunity just because of their sheer distribution of users and mindshare in the space. It's finally a big moment for not only Lightspark, but the Lightning Network, and we're going to finally start to see if people actually like to use Lightning, because it's one of the biggest issues Lightning has faced is that adoption has been a bit lackluster. So hopefully things like this increase or reduce the barriers to entry to using Lightning Network, and hopefully we see some adoption on the not too distant future.
Gee, between Lightning upgrades and the halving coming up and all these inscriptions, improvements, and the BitVM and all that, it's quite surprising just how much Bitcoin is back in the narrative and leading the narrative.
It's definitely leading the narrative, and it's also leading the topic in other investment managers, because maybe a good point here to finish off is, I'm not sure if you saw Goldman Sachs, one of their heads of the wealth division. I was surprised to see, we think cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, so widely known, but I'm still surprised to see people in those positions that don't understand Bitcoin, because they openly kind of had a few things to say that they didn't like Bitcoin. But I was surprised to see that they said that this person said, hey, you can't actually hold your own Bitcoin like you can gold. Right. Which is on this topic of, Bitcoin coming a long way, a lot of narratives. I'm still surprised to see just falsehood spread about Bitcoin or misunderstandings in the market.
Yeah, when they're outspoken and confidently saying things that are wrong, I kind of just think if you don't know something, just don't comment at all. But it's interesting. Here we are, all these years later, and misconceptions like that still being spread. But we do our bit week by week to try to address those, but we do our part. But a lot of ways to go as this asset class and industry matures. But for this week, that is a wrap. If you are looking for more insights, definitely head to the Weekly Shift newsletter and go ahead and subscribe. So the URL to do that and to receive these newsletters free of charge every Friday is collectiveshift.io/newsletter. That's collectiveshift.io/newsletter.